the local residents, they're going to face harsher and more challenging situations than companies, like complaining about not having enough electricities.
Welcome back to System Shift, a podcast from Greenpeace which explores how to move from a world that serves the economy to economies that work for people and the planet. I'm Joycelyn Longdon. I'm an environmental justice technologist, writer and educator, and I was also one of your hosts for season 3. We're back with a bonus episode about a topic that lies very closely to my work on technology and environmental justice. We're going to be speaking today about AI, a topic on everyone's lips at the moment. In this episode, we're going to be asking the question, Nvidia just hit the $5 trillion milestone. Who is paying the price? To understand the AI's impact on the East Asian region, we'll hear from 2 campaigners from Taiwan and South Korea who have been directly affected by this industry. To help us do this, I want to introduce Katrin Wu from Greenpeace East Asia. Katrin is a senior campaigner and project leader for Greenpeace East Asia's regional tech campaign, where she advocates for the transition of renewable energy for tech companies in the region. Welcome, Katrin. It's really great to have you here. I'm really excited about this conversation, and I think it's going to be full of a lot of interesting information, but a lot of important information. So I think our guests are in for a treat for today's conversation.
Thank you, Joycelyn, for having me here. It's like an honor to be here and joining this podcast, and also like highlighting and explaining some of the issues that AI industries have on our region, like East Asia. Yeah.
So I think we've heard a lot about the environmental impact of data centers, which are incredibly important, but we've heard less about the environmental impact of supply chain issues like chip manufacturing and those kind of parts of the AI ecosystem. So could you tell us a little bit more about some of the supply chain emissions of the AI industry beyond data centers and how this links with the manufacture of chips?
Yes, definitely. We just did a research on the big players' supply chain emissions and how they managed to decarbonize the supply chain emissions. And the result is not very, positive. So when we're talking about like the supply chain emissions of AI companies, it can be as high as like 98% of some of the AI companies' like total emissions. For example, like Nvidia in 2024, its supply chain emissions accounted for more than 85% actually of its like total emissions. And about like a decade ago, different companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Google, they have, started to transition to 100% renewable energies. But until today, different companies, they have been in like different progress on this kind of like spectrum. And also like for companies like Nvidia or like AMD, where they are more on the chip designing part of the ecosystem, they haven't really started to look after their supply chain emission part, where like they really like overlooked or they ignored their supply chain decarbonization issues. So that's the problem started. And because of this group of company, they really ignore their like supply chain decarbonization issues. Their suppliers were located in East Asia. They haven't really, move on to or like accelerate their 100% renewable energy goals or like their renewable energy transition at all, where it created some like local issues.
Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting place to start. And it's interesting to think about how a lot of the focus goes on to those big players, right? And their emissions. And they give, they send out these really big, ambitious targets of 100% renewables. And we see that they don't stick to these targets. They overlook, ignore, and even roll back on some of these targets. But there's a whole other world that we have to be looking at and campaigning for those same actions, those same emissions targets and emissions behaviors, emissions reducing behaviors. So I think it would be interesting to talk a little bit more about this kind of ranking that you did. because we have a lot of the big players higher up in the ranking. And these big players get a lot more media attention than, say, from a perspective of their environmental impact than, say, a company like Nvidia. And part of this, I think, is around this issue of creating a division between the general public and tech companies. We see that the more technical they get, or the more sort of behind the scenes that they are, the less understanding that we as a general public have of really what their impact is and what we should be fighting for in terms of their emissions and environmental impact. So it would be, interesting to hear more about the research, how the research was conducted, and whether you were able to hear from any of these companies about their perspectives and their goals around improving their environmental impact.
We looked into 10 top AI players. So companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon. So these are on the front line of the AI industry. And also we looked into the chip designing companies like Nvidia, Qualcomm, AMD, Broadcom, and Intel. So 10 companies in total. And we looked into their operational decarbonization progress and also their supply chain decarbonization progress. So overall, Apple was ranked at the top of the ranking, and Nvidia and Broadcom were really at the bottom of the ranking. And also another very interesting point is when we compare these companies' operational decarbonization progress and also their supply chain decarbonization progress, we really see the supply chain decarbonization progress was really, overlooked or ignored by these companies, as I mentioned before. And also these companies are not really, proactively working towards transitioning their whole supply chain onto renewable energy. So when, of course, their supply chain, their suppliers are based in elsewhere, not in their headquarters, where renewable energy transition progress has been really lagged behind. The whole power grid is mainly powered by fossil fuel, but these companies where they earn more than $1 billion every year, they don't really want to proactively or really supporting their suppliers to go 100% to renewable energies. They really want to just rely on the national sort of agenda or policy, where policy might not be really progressed. The policy part is not really there yet to help the companies to go on renewables. So I think that's where the issues are. And when we did the research, we also, sent our emails, and also we wanted to chat with the companies, but some of the companies replied to us, companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, who else? AMD, they have been chatting with us. We had a great chat, but there are companies who have not really been, replying to us. Companies I don't think Meta replied to us, and also Nvidia has really been ignoring our messages.
And this is an issue that is beyond the individual companies themselves, but has a global impact. The race for AI, the increase in AI development and AI products from these big companies, but also from all of the other companies kind of jumping on the bandwagon that is built on a supply chain, have dire implications for global electricity demand as we are trying to engage in not only reducing emissions, but really fundamentally shifting how we engage with and how much energy we use as a global community. So to give you some context, by 2030, global electricity demand, just for AI chip making, so not the whole AI industry, but just for chip making in the supply chain process, is estimated to reach as much as 37,238 gigawatt hours, which is 170 times more than the energy demand for chip making that was required in 2023. And this is more than the total current electricity consumption of Ireland. So not only are these companies making more money than countries, but also using multiple times more energy and electricity than entire countries as well. And this growth has had a very acute impact on East Asia specifically. And so it'd be really interesting to understand what this kind of global and more Western development of AI, why that impact is so specific to East Asia.
For these places, the electricity grids are mainly powered by fossil fuel. So like when the electricity consumption from the key companies like growing, that means that like if the company, they are not proactively transition to renewable energies, they will take more electricity powered by fossil fuel to meet their own like energy demand, which means like more electricity demands from them, like more fossil fuel based energies. So that's not a very good news for us. For South Korea, the government also like approved 1,000 gigawatt hour liquefied natural gas, so LNG gas, combined with like heat and power plants for SK Hynix in this like huge semiconductor cluster area. And also like the government also like plans to build 3 gigawatt hour LNG power plants for Samsung Electronics. And for Taiwan, LNG is also like introduced into like meeting like the electricity demands coming from the semiconductor companies as well. And not only LNG will play a huge role, nuclear power plants is also like proposed as a new solution for this industry to meet its rising electricity demands. So this is like the harsh reality that we're gonna face. The local communities, they're gonna face like harsher and more challenging situations than companies, like complaining about not having enough electricities from the governments.
Yeah, so I mean, it's such a complex space, and I think we've got a few new terms there. So we've got semiconductor chips, and essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about semiconductor chips are the brains of AI. These are the chips that go into all of the systems. They're made out of materials like silicone. And what you're saying is, and what you're describing is that East Asia has become the heart of the brain of AI. East Asia is the region that is manufacturing all of the chips that really power AI. None of the algorithms could run without these semiconductor chips. So in the wake of all of this development and this increase in fossil fuel use and energy use in East Asian communities, I am really interested to understand how the regions are dealing with these energy demand increases and what this looks like for local residents and communities, because these are the people who are often left out of the story. And so I'm really excited that in this episode, we're going to hear from two incredible people who are very close to the impacts of the AI industry in East Asia and who are campaigning and fighting for better outcomes, for better futures for their people in the face of AI dominance and AI energy dominance. So first, let's hear from Sun Kim, a South Korean campaigner who filed a lawsuit against LNG power plants being built in his community.
Hello to all our listeners. I'm Sunil Kim from the South Korea, and I'm the community outreach campaigner in the Greenpeace East Asia at Seoul office. I work to encourage the citizen participation in various campaigns and to build the people power, the forms of the foundation of some kind of issue campaigns. Basically, LNG, full name is liquefied natural gas. Yes, it is still fossil fuel. So LNG constantly leaks the methane throughout its production, refining, transportation, storage, and the combustion processes. And the methane has a greenhouse gas effect more than 80 times greater than the carbon dioxide. Also, additionally, the various air pollutants are emitted from the energy power plant. Many local residents didn't realize how serious it would be to have an energy power plant built right in their community. In fact, many believed, just as the government promoted, that bringing in the semiconductor cluster would bring economical benefits. However, for residents living with 10-kilometer radius, the energy power plant will be directly affecting their health. In August last year, the Constitutional Court of Korea, the country's highest judicial authority, ruled that the government response to climate change was insufficient. Despite this, the government went ahead and approved the energy power plant. So we decided to move forward with the lawsuit because the energy power plant which are planned to build in Yongin cluster will lead the other gas power plant and infrastructure to be built in Korea. And now the Korea and corporate should stop plan to build a new gas power plant and change the energy mixes to renewable energy. And logical and just law for people and the environment is needed in these times. We literally went door to door in Yongin. We met a lot of people, the door to door and man to man. Meeting the resident face to face, we explained that the energy power plant would mean for their community, and we also shared the alternative that could lead to the better future without LNG. It was not always smooth. Some interest group tried to discredit our work. At times, they even filed the complaint to block us from holding the information session in public venue, but still we kept going. We spoke with the lifelong resident who want to leave the healthier future for their children, with the parent raising kids in Yongin, and with students who began questioning this issue after learning about the environmental at school. So each citizen brought their own story onto this lawsuit. I want to tell you about the story about one of our citizens who joined the lawsuit. She said she was initially pleased when she first heard about the semiconductor cluster. Many in her community believed that the property value would rise and that something positive was coming. But however, once she learned that the cluster would include the energy power plants, consuming the unimaginable amount of the energy, she decided to take part in the lawsuit. For her, the Yongin was the place where she raised her children. It sits at the boundary between the city and the countryside, filled with the memory about the whole family. Yet she was never given a real opportunity to oppose to the energy project. She felt this was deeply unjust, and it ultimately led her to join a lawsuit for her children and for the Yongin. Our lawsuit has gathered attention from the political side, the corporate and media, and now more and more organizations and people are realizing the energy issue about the cluster. We hope that through this legal action, more citizens will become aware of the issue. That we want to show that there are the better choice available to us. As Korean government is focusing on the AI and trying to boost up the AI industries in Korea, we would like to see the government, Samsung, SK Hynix, and also the AI giant which use the Korean chips invest in renewable energy and declare that they will use the renewable energy 100% as their net zero goals.
Let's now hear from Lena Chang, a Greenpeace campaigner who will talk to us about the impact that the tech industry is having in Taiwan specifically.
So I'm Lena Chang from Taiwan, and we are working together with Greenpeace East Asia on the topic of supply chain, especially in the AI development. We are working to campaign on the energy transition within this industry. Taiwan is actually at the heart of the world's technology supply chain, like the center of it, because it produces over 60% of all semiconductor, especially for the advanced chip that's used for AI data center and all the AI tools that we know. More than 90% of them are produced in Taiwan from this company TSMC. We know that Taiwan is like the center of AI technology, but it also produces those technology with dirty energy that is mostly gas and coals, this fossil fuel. So in 2023, the fossil fuel in Taiwan is account for more than 80% of our electricity grid. So the more chips are made, the more dirty energy is consumed and the more air pollution there is. Actually, the electronic industry is the main driver for our electricity demand. So it also causes problem for air pollution because when these chips are running on dirty energy, it produces toxic air and that pollutes a local community. And we actually have a research that shows the fossil fuel-based electricity for Taiwan's. It has caused around 100 premature deaths per year in 2016. And based on our research, without like ambition from the corporate and also a proactive policy to change that, by 2030, fossil fuel power could lead to 400 every early deaths annually and over $2 billion in lost productivity. So the air pollution impacts are not really evenly spread. The areas like in the south, like cities like Kaohsiung, and in the north, New Taipei, and in the middle, Taichung City, where factories and power plants meet dense population. So people are actually paying the cost of AI development. So for example, in the city Kaohsiung, people live near the power plant and the factory face much higher health risks from breathing in those toxic chemicals. So their cancer death rates are actually 2 to 4 times higher than the average. And also the recent news is that in this September, a gas leak explosion at one of the power plant nearby that region has caused several fire and disaster in that district. So people are actually afraid that their health might be impacted by the air pollution. Greenpeace advocates for transition to renewable energy, but it's not the only solution. What we need is everyone to join for this energy transition. So not only renewable energy, but also storage system and all the grid update. So it's all connected. So it's not only we are focusing on renewable energy, but the whole energy transition system. I think the more ability you have, the more responsibility that you should take. But so everyone has a role to play. But for those corporate, they are making a lot of profit on this AI development. So they also are accountable for the pollution and, basically the climate crisis. They have been, making it worse. So yeah, that's why we are calling on those AI giants to take real action on the renewable energy transition. I think there's still hope because we have seen a company that they are trying to achieve 100% renewable energy and they are investing to upgrade local grids and storage to make the whole system more energy efficient. So what we are saying is that it's not we are against AI development. We just want it to be cleaner. So those companies, they should pledge and to take action towards 100% renewable energy.
It's so interesting to hear from Sun about the impact on local communities and residents from the development of LNG power plants for AI manufacturing. And what really struck me is the similarities of these impacts with other marginalized communities around the world, this really physical public health issue that is posed by the power plants for AI development. And also this sort of misleading marketing and communication around why these plants should be built. Community members are, told and lied to essentially about the economic benefits, which have been completely separated from the environmental and social health benefits, or negatives, the health impacts of these plants. And so that direct impact on community health is such a huge issue, but one that really connects to struggles across the world in the face of both environmental breakdown, but also specifically AI development.
Yeah, I think that also reminds me of the news. So Jensen Huang was in Korea, and he was really introducing like the economic benefits of Nvidia like partnering with like South Korean like companies like SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics. And he has always been like, really highlighting on like the economic benefits of this kind of like business deal. But I think like the real impact on the community is like really unknown for like lots of like public audience. And if like Nvidia companies like Nvidia really like concentrating on like bringing the economic benefits onto like the local residents or like onto like the local communities, it should also like introducing like the new renewable energy resources onto like the countries, because that's like the part of like business deal. And also like we see like renewable energy could also like bring economic benefits onto the companies as well. So I think if like Jason Huang is really smart about it, he should like really work on to introducing like renewable energy resources onto like the local communities.
But I'd love to now think a little bit more about what we can do. What's our role in this story?
Definitely, we should educate ourselves. So AI environmental, like impact is not just like data centers, or it's not just like one part of the issue. So like we know like now AI has like a huge ecosystem, and every part has its own like complex environmental issues. So it's like supply chain. So like definitely educate yourself, and also like loop your friends into this conversation. Also sign up for our petition, like pushing big companies like Nvidia onto like a more cleaner and also like more sustainable manufacturing supply chain role.
Thank you so much for those calls to action, Katrin. I think they're incredibly important, and any of the links and resources that we've spoken about during our conversation and that last petition that we also highlighted will all be linked and included in the show notes. So please do have a look, sign the petition, and also use those links and resources to, as Katrin mentioned, educate yourselves and your friends and family as well. So at the end of each podcast, we ask, can change happen in our lifetime? And we've been speaking a lot today about lots of the change that is happening rapidly in relation to AI development and the AI supply chain. Of course, what we as campaigners and researchers working for and with communities for environmental justice and for progress and abundance in the environmental movement, we want to think about not just what the negative impacts are, but also what the world might look like and what change we can make and be a part of. So Katrin, I mean, how do you feel about this issue, especially working in this area? Do you feel that these changes that we're demanding, the shifts in the AI industry can happen in our lifetime?
I mean, like I'm quite positive, like AI companies, they have like huge power to play. And the demands that we're just like demanding now, like there are companies doing this companies like Apple, who has been, you know, like committed to 100% renewable energy across supply chain by 2030, they're like working towards this goal. So there are examples and there are role models that other companies can, you know, like learn from. If Apple can do it, so can Nvidia. It's an urgent issue, you know, because like climate change is an urgent issue, it's an urgency. We talk about like climate urgency. So we were hopeful to see all these things can be like happening soon.
Yeah, we have all the tools that we need. And what's really great is that we have campaigners like you, campaigners like Sun and Lena, and all of the people. There are lots of other researchers, activists, community members that I know that are fighting this issue. And so it's important that us as a general public, especially living so far away from these issues, really engages with understanding and educating ourselves on these issues and providing support to those communities, to those grassroots organizing groups, to the researchers, to the people, campaigners working on this issue. And that is how we make change. We make it together. So thank you so much, Katrin, for all of the incredible information you've shared with us in this podcast. It has been really insightful, really eye-opening, and I think a really important one. And also thank you to everyone listening to this episode of System Shift. You can subscribe to System Shift wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss out on any future episodes. You can also watch the episodes on YouTube with subtitles available in traditional Chinese and Korean. Just search for System Shift, all one word, on YouTube. And while you're there, leave us a comment with your thoughts, and we'll see you next time.